Are dogs Republicans? Maybe is the debate we should be having because they don't like people coming into their space. Even though the people who come to the door are inevitably bringing him food and resources that he needs to survive, he still
Yeah.
doesn't like them coming here. So I think my dog is a Trump supporter.
And I think probably my cat votes third party. So
As because cats are the great betrayers.
they're the great pretender, and she does what she wants. Fuck you.
Yeah. So your cat is just laying there thinking, Jill Stein is my friend. When we all know Jill Stein is not your friend. Hello and welcome to Eric McElroy's American Exchange with me, Eric McElroy. And yeah, this is our first podcast post the 2024 election result. And so um, you know, it's not an ideal time for someone who wasn't hoping for this result. Um, Luckily, my first guest on post-election is Karin Robinson, who was absolutely brilliant to talk to. She's a former podcaster herself. She is an author who's got a book that's going to hopefully be coming out soon. Her podcast was known as Democratically 2020. She's a former vice chair of Democrats Abroad, and we've known each other for a number of years. I was on her podcast pre-2020, happier times. And she's great. She's absolutely brilliant. It was kind of one of her first conversations post-election as well. And for those of us who were hoping for a different outcome, I think we're at this sort of grieving shock stage. Whether she was more nervous about the results than I was. I was more bullish. If you've listened to previous episodes about Kamala winning, I thought that she had it. The people that I've had on this podcast, a lot of them thought that she had it as well. In private messages I was sending with various people, and there was a lot of things that I think went right. We talk today, with Karin and I about what went wrong, about where we think things are going and where blame is going to be put and where maybe it shouldn't be put. Should Biden have dropped out earlier? I think the answer to that is going to be yes. Those are the things. There's a lot of looking back. I'm feeling a little bit invigorated in that I want to look forward as a campaign type person, and get involved in the next fight, because I think we're going to need that. Because I obviously Democrats didn't speak to the people they needed to connect with to vote that way. But the things that Trump has promised to do, I think, will overall be bad for um, the people that didn't support him and for the people who did support him. And that's what we're going to be talking about on this podcast and on podcasts going forward. Because apparently, in the podcast ecosystem, the more liberal podcasts are what we need. So, let's make this. I think I'm a lot like Joe Rogan. I'm a comedian. I think he's a comedian as well, and a wrestler. I think a wrestler or something like that. Fighter. I think I'm that too. Um, Conspiracy theorist, a smidge. Maybe I should become a conspiracy theorist as well. But I don't know. There's going to be a lot of thoughts about what happens next. I'm sad. I'm disappointed. I do think that there was an inherent racism and misogyny that was going on. Although looking at now, maybe some of the structural things that are happening, people maybe just weren't going to vote for the incumbent party no matter what. Why they would choose to vote for a felon and a sexual offender, I don't know. So that's what we're going to be thinking about. We're talking about, but it was great to connect with Karin on here. Um, I enjoyed our conversation, even though it's about some pretty hard things. I think that we're at that point of just seeing where it all goes. We finished the conversation with some things that you can do if you are feeling blue about this. I would imagine people who are really keen about Trump winning probably aren't listening to this particular podcast, but why not? I listen to things that I don't agree with. I think it's important to do. But thank you for listening, and thank you for Karin. And make sure to do the like and subscribe thing. And here is Karin Robinson. Oh, and if you're a YouTube person, this is the time to like it and subscribe to the channel. And we've got more videos coming out. I got comedy content coming out as well. So please do that as well. Please enjoy Karin. Well, I'm excited. Well, I don't know if are any of us excited about anything right now. I am pleased to welcome to the podcast fellow expat Karin Robinson. Karin, it feels good to see a fellow traveler on this path. How are you doing?
Oh, Eric, it's good to see your face, as you say. It's good to connect with people and friends. And that's kind of where I think we all need to probably put our focus for a little while now. But I'm not doing great. I'm not gonna lie. It's been
Yeah.
tough. And I was a nervous wreck before the election. And it's one of those rare circumstances where all your worst fears come true, and then you just have to cope with that. So um, and I also have this terrible feeling that, it isn't just that bad things have happened, it's the terrible things that are now inevitably going to happen, and we will watch
Yeah.
them unfold one by one. So it doesn't feel great, not gonna lie. But I've been doing everything I can to just focus on getting myself through the day, breathing, eating healthy, getting some exercise, and trying to make myself mentally and physically strong enough for what I know is coming.
Yeah, I think I mean I'd like, I mean, I've the main premise of this podcast is dialing back across the pond to find
Yeah.
out, to talk to people in the States to get an idea because, like you, I've been living outside of the US for quite a while. I think I've been longer than you. I can't remember how long you've been outside the US.
Uh, 2000 is when I moved here.
2000, 1999. I could beat you.
Ooh, we're
But it was
pretty close.
one year in Germany, and then I came to the UK in 2000. So I've been gone for 25 years. So you're right on my tails. But to get an idea what's happening and that conversation, to get an idea about the pulse, because we're far away and I'm absorbing as much through the media as I can because I care about this for some reason. And the people I was talking to, and I was talking, I know, talking to journalists, talking to political influencers, and people on the left, pretty much the message was, she's got this, we've got this. These are people in the ground campaigning in the States. And so I feel embarrassedly flat-footed.
Right.
And I think, obviously a lot of people are, even though the poll said it was close, we've sort of discounted the polls.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's two things going
I
on.
think
One is,
that's I
how
think
did
that's
this
really
happen?
interesting.
And then, yeah, the fear for what will come. Um, and I guess the hope that because Trump is so genuinely incompetent and most of the people he generally surrounds himself around are so useless, although they did manage to win this campaign. But I think that might be a broader failure. Like a true Democrat, I'm going to blame us.
The firing squad always operates in a circle.
I
Circular
mean,
formation.
well, because I mean, you were somebody who's been involved. I mean, so I'm a volunteer for Democrats Abroad, but
Yeah.
I'm not part of the leadership structure. I try and avoid real responsibility, and I did things to try and help. But I mean, as somebody who's been on the inside of that, what happened? What's the process that what you think will happen now within the party structure?
So I think this is gonna sound very controversial. Um,
Hmm.
I'm not convinced we lost this election in the sense of I'm not convinced it was the Democrats that lost it as much as
Okay.
it was winning it. And so, it's interesting you say everyone you spoke to thought we had this in the bag. That was not my experience.
Hmm.
The people I was speaking to definitely acknowledged that it was close. It could absolutely go either way.
Yep.
I spent some time just before the election in Atlanta, Georgia, for, as it turned out, something for my day job that I wound up putting me in Atlanta. And so I spoke to some people on the ground there. In
Hmm.
fact, I tried to get into a Kamala rally that was happening just outside Atlanta, but I was the first person to not get in, which is the worst
Hmm.
position in any campaign.
So close.
It was so frustrating. But anyway, I could have seen. Anyway, it's fine. It's fine. It's over. But it gave me the chance to talk to lots of people there on online. And I'll be honest, as much as I felt there was a lot of enthusiasm for her, and as much as I felt there was a lot of energy, my read of my time in Georgia did not feel like we were winning that state.
Hmm.
I didn't see the kind of energy that I've seen on the ground in swing states that we've been winning in previous elections.
Hmm.
Spent time in Pennsylvania, Virginia when that was competitive, etc. Um, it was just quiet on the Democratic side. It didn't feel
Hmm.
like, not that people weren't doing things, there were people doing the good work, but felt quiet, felt nervous, felt edgy.
Hmm.
And I spoke to a fascinating conversation I had with a taxi driver, a really interesting woman. We had a good chat, because obviously Atlanta being very an African American, kind of Georgia being very African American demographic, and there was a lot of conversations about Trump making gains in the African American community. And from my conversation with her, I felt like that was true. She was talking to
Mm.
me about, she was supporting Kamala, her family was, but she has a brother. We all have one.
Hmm.
He had a brother who
Yeah.
was had become a flat earther, Trump supporting. And I thought, yeah, there's probably a chunk of people like that. So I feel like that was a cultural force. But I think if you look at the results of the election, so I had all these feelings going into it.
Mm.
And then coming out of it, I thought, okay, what did we do wrong? What did we do right? And if you look at what actually happened, if you look at that how the numbers went, right? There was a consistent national rightward swing. Like
Mm.
every state went further right than in previous years, and the swing states where we were actively campaigning went less far right than the states where we weren't campaigning. So
Mm.
there's some evidence that actually the campaign was reasonably effective. We
Yeah.
have lots of reason to think that when Democrats switched candidates, we were making a good choice because Kamala
Mm.
Harris was more favorably received, did do better in the outcome of the actual election than Biden was doing in his polls when he dropped out. I'm not sure that, I mean, there are definitely lessons to be learned. I'm not saying don't grow, don't learn, don't develop. We absolutely should. But I just want to be cautious of not falling down the rabbit hole of assuming that there's any one thing we could have done differently that would have led to us
Mm.
winning. In 2016, I think there probably were individual things we could have done differently where we could have won that election. This time, with such a broad national rightward trend, I think the fundamentals were just so far against us that it was never ours to win in the first place. That is my theory, at
Mm.
least.
Yeah, I think, and I'm not a data person, but it, the reason why I'm thinking it's a little bit the Democrats' responsibility is that our voters didn't turn up like they did in 2020. Now, that's going to be an interesting, where those people went.
So, look, we always want to get more voters to the poll, for
Yeah.
sure. But one of the reasons why I think the people that you've been speaking to within the Democratic Party might have seemed surprisingly, in retrospect, enthusiastic about their
Mm.
chances were if you look at the numbers of actual votes cast
Yeah.
in the swing states, Kamala got more votes than Biden got in 2020.
Hmm.
It's just that Trump got even more. It's
Right.
not that we didn't get our people to the polls, although, I mean, we always can get more. There's always room for us to look and find more people. The problem is Trump, and this has been the case from the moment he stepped onto that stupid escalator and entered this race, he reaches parts of the electorate that no other politician can reach. And he
Mm.
got people to the polls who typically don't vote in very high numbers. And he did that not by his campaign activity, not because he ran a great campaign, because he did not, like on the
Yeah.
ground, run a good campaign,
Yeah, it was awful.
and just because of who he is. Like, honestly, he excited people.
So I guess when people start looking at the overall numbers, what I'm hearing from you is that we can't look at the totals because the totals don't really matter. What matters is what happened in the swing states because no
Yeah,
one actively campaigns in some place like California.
yeah.
Yeah, there might be more or less and it may fluctuate, but because they're not getting the information that the swing state voters are, they're not getting the get out the vote action that the swing state voters are, and so on. So looking at the national numbers really aren't that significant.
I mean, it's always interesting, and it looks
But
like Trump is.
interesting, yeah.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
it
it looks.
doesn't matter,
I mean,
really.
well, it
It
matters down ballot, right? Because,
Yes, that's
and I
true.
think especially this year, so California is probably the state that will decide whether or not we take back the House,
Yeah,
um, which is looking not impossible, but difficult for us at the moment, right? But not
yeah.
impossible. I'll take that.
Yeah, we're recording this on the Friday after the election, and this will probably go out on the Monday. So we might know by Monday, where the
We
house is at.
might.
But
I would guess we probably don't, but if in fact we do, you can just cut me saying that from the podcast and make me sound
eh,
smarter.
no. Well, yeah,
Ha-
we can re-engineer. Well, I mean, to be fair, we live in a post-fact, post-truth world.
Yeah,
You can
what
just say that you called it right, and no one will take the time to listen to 7.5 minutes into the podcast to challenge it. And
exactly.
then it doesn't matter if you lie or commit felonies or do anything else because you just say you didn't. And
Because
anyway,
law,
that's a
nothing matters.
sidetrack. Anyway, on the numbers,
But
just
California will probably, it usually takes weeks
decide
to,
the House.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it will decide the House. So yeah, so that matters, right? And all the other places. And honestly, there are some Senate races that we either just barely won or might just barely win. So all the campaign work that we did in those states, but also just like the general thing. So Trump's the some of the Senate losses that we had, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, I'm devastated to see him lose. He's
Hmm.
great. He was a great senator for that state, did great work, was very popular in his state. I think probably still is very popular in his state.
Yeah.
But because there was such a successful driving of Trump enthusiasts to the polls, he got overwhelmed and lost a close election. So those kinds of things do matter. It will
Hmm.
matter long term. Like we've lost a great senator for not only a great Democrat, but a great senator for that state. So those things matter. But then if you look at the swing states, the point is, what I was trying to say is numerically, more people in the swing states voted for Kamala this year than voted for Biden in 2020.
Right.
But more people voted for Trump. So we
In those
lost,
states.
but not in those states. But we lost, but not by losing. It's not clear that we lost our vote. I mean, there would definitely be some people who
Hmm.
stayed. So I think,
Because yeah, because so far in the total numbers, not looking at state by state, but nationally, I mean, we're still counting votes in
yeah,
California, so the final number isn't in. Trump still hasn't reached the totals he reached in 2020. He's down at the point of recording. He got
yeah,
74.2 million in 2020 overall nationally, and
yeah,
he's currently only at 73.5 million. So he'll probably get there,
yeah,
but barely.
yeah,
Whereas the Democrats are down by almost 12 million votes nationally.
yeah,
And I know that that doesn't decide the election, but you have to assume that if a fraction of those 12 million people turned up
yeah.
and voted, that would have made a difference.
Yeah. I mean, let's see.
That's where I'm saying we didn't turn up.
Yeah,
That's the number I'm looking at. But I know you're right. It's the swing states where they didn't turn up,
it's swing
maybe.
states that matter. But so it's the maths are going to math. We'll figure it out.
Hmm.
But the information that I'm seeing is that as you say in the swing states, that the numbers are for Kamala, just numerically higher than they were. Now,
Sure.
of course, other things have changed, right?
Hmm.
One of the things that Democrats are going to have to kind of think long and hard about is the demographic shifts around the country are taking, that if Trump and the right wing can gain even slightly more support within Latino voters, among
Hmm.
Black voters, and at the same time, lots of states that used to be competitive are now solidly right, right? Like, so Florida used to be a competitive state. It is not now.
Yeah.
It's a big chunk of votes to take out of the Electoral College for us.
Hmm.
So these two factors together, and they reinforce each other, they're going to make it really hard for us to win in the future. So
Hmm.
where do we find new voters? Now in 2020, I was really excited that we were able to win Georgia. Looks like
Yeah.
Georgia's reverting back, but we still have two good senators there. So do we go all in on a kind of new South strategy of trying to win those guys back?
Hmm.
Um, Looking at the Sun Belt again, I mean Arizona, Nevada looked really bad for us this year. We did really badly in Nevada compared to that being a state that we usually comfortably win. Arizona's not
Hmm.
looking great. Like, where do we find the new support that we need, the new opportunities? How do we open up the map
Yeah.
again? Um, Now, is this, sorry, I'm just ranting now, but then I kind of question myself and I say, okay, but I actually suspect in 4 years' time we're in thermostatic polarization, which
Yeah.
means the electorate swings one way against incumbents, and then the next cycle, and then Democrats get aligned now again, as we
Yeah.
did after Trump won in 2016, and it gets thermostatic, and now it switches back. So do we switch back into a mode of now the Republicans are on the back foot for everything?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
It's easy to overcorrect because
it's
we're
easy to
constantly fighting
overcorrect.
the last campaign. And I mean, one of the things I really liked about this, and partly I'm swayed by some of the guests that I have on who I find fascinating. I've talked to a lot of former Republicans, people that were in the Trump administration who've
Yeah.
gone against him. And I always find that interesting because they've, the progress and the process that they've gone through, and because they've been close to Trump or close
Yeah.
to the political apparatus that built him. Like Joe Walsh, I find is a fascinating character because he has, he's still conservative in some of his values,
Yeah.
but he has continued, we've been chipping away at him now that I've been talking to him for four
He's been
years.
on quite a
And
journey.
and he's a lot more woke than he was. He's admitted he was racist towards Obama. He's apologized. He's working to atone for
Yeah.
helping to build the platform that Trump eventually stood on. And so the Harris campaign embracing these Republicans for Harris and building the broadest coalition I've ever politically seen in my lifetime. That's what gave me more optimism than I
Yeah.
should have had.
Yeah.
That Dick Cheney, as evil as that fucker is, to Bernie Sanders coming together to say, look, this is a dire emergency. I thought that was incredible. And clearly, because Republicans stayed with voting for Republican for
Yeah.
president, it didn't work. Maybe. So should we have just dug in and done what Trump did and just keep going for the base and going for the base and going for the base? And that would have given us those extra few votes.
So, I mean, again, does any of this matter? Who knows? The,
Yeah.
the point is, so there's a political science question. How much do campaigns actually matter?
Yeah.
And there's a genuine
Of
debate
course.
being had in political science whether those types of decisions make any difference whatsoever.
Yep.
And I think if you were kind of looking for natural experiments, you'd have to say this election could be used as one
Mm.
example suggesting that perhaps they don't matter that much, right?
Yeah.
Like a little bit at the margin, a point or two at the margin in a key state can move things, but fundamentally, that the election is motivated by how people feel about the economy, how people feel
Yeah.
about the incumbent president, how people feel about the future. And right now, we are coming out of a very grim post-pandemic time where people irrationally perhaps blame the current Democratic president for their lives having been difficult over the last few years. They've got high inflation and they're angry about it, even though as expats, we know inflation was just as high, if not higher, in the rest of the world and came
Yeah.
down less quickly. They don't know that, and they probably wouldn't care if we told them because as far as they, like, and to be fair, like, I get it.
Yeah.
You go into the shop, things you want to buy are really expensive. Your wage packet does not match up with the things you need to live, and it's got to be somebody's fault. I think that's understandable. But these are the factors that are in play, and I'm not sure. Like I too was very excited about the breadth of the coalition. I thought
Mm.
that Kamala put together a really good kind of suite of supporters across a range of ideological
Yeah.
positions without compromising her own integrity. So it wasn't
Yeah.
that she swung to the right on policy. She was like, look, here are my beliefs. Here are the people who are share those beliefs on democracy, etc. None of it mattered. None
Mm.
of it mattered. Like, probably didn't hurt, but didn't help.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, then it goes, then there's going to be the analysis over the gender question and the candidate. I think that the swap out. Well, Joe Biden was obviously slipping after that debate. You could see it coming beforehand. But the swap out coming so late in the game, because America is so vast and because you have to repeat things so much to have it permeate, and Trump's been on message for 2 years,
Yeah,
economy and foreigners, even though most of what he said was a lie, that's everyone knows. And if you speak
yeah,
to Republicans abroad, when we debate them on various platforms, they talk about those two things built on lies, but it doesn't matter. We can talk about the truth thing in a second. Because she only had 3 months to create her, because vice presidents are never meant to be at the front of in the visibility
yeah,
range that you see, you need a year of running in a primary, of establishing yourself to seep into the consciousness
yeah.
of a country as vast and as overwhelmed, and people who aren't engaged on day to day because they are, I don't know why, Karen, they're not following this like we are. Because it's, the fact
Probably
that
because they
both
have
of
a healthy relationship with the news cycle, which I don't.
no, the fact that we're discussing the different amounts of voter totals in swing states versus national states is what everyone should be talking about right now, not the
It's all
price
that
of
matters.
fucking gasoline. Who cares? How many people turned up in, King County in Washington State versus 1965? That's what we should be talking. So clearly we're geeks, but maybe that's, I mean, and obviously, and I'm not saying that to blame Biden. I can see why he wanted to win. I think that a type of person like Biden who has a folksy charm, and if he was 10 years younger and a better communicator, we wouldn't have been in this situation. And
Yeah.
Buddy's joining in because he cared as well. This is
Oh,
Buddy.
sweetie.
He's barking at something. Buddy, do you want to go out? We're going to let Buddy out. This is
All right.
part of it. Buddy's not part of the podcast because
Now
we
we're
have
gonna pause for a
dogs in
station
our
break.
lives. No, this is all this. I'm not cutting anything, Karen. This is going. All right, you want to go out, Buddy? Here we go. All right, Buddy's going to go protect me from the mail. You know, listen, I think dogs inherent. I mean, I think are dogs Republicans? Maybe is the debate we should be having because they don't like people coming into their space. Even though the people who come to the door are inevitably bringing him food and resources that he needs to survive, he still
Yeah.
doesn't like them coming here. So I think my dog is a Trump supporter.
Um, I think your dog is whatever you tell him to be because they're just trying to please. And I think probably my cat votes third party. So
As because cats are the great betrayers.
they're the great pretender, and then she does what she wants. Fuck you.
Yeah. So your cat is just laying there thinking, Jill Stein is my friend. When we all know Jill Stein is not your friend.
No, absolutely.
Uh,
So where were we? Oh, so
where were
the
we?
gender thing. So Biden, etc.
Well, and Jen, I mean, so do you think, because a lot of people are going to take, there's going to be the takeaway of this that we can never run a female candidate at the top of the ticket again.
Yeah.
And I would hate for that to be the final analysis that America can't vote for a woman. I mean, the three things I tweeted, because tweeted or threaded or posted wherever I am these days. The three reasons that I felt is that it was misogyny, racism, and the fact that we're in a post-truth environment.
Yeah,
That was my initial takeaway on the morning of.
and do you still think that?
Well, because people split their ticket and voted for a female senator and voted against
Yeah.
Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
I don't.
So-
So maybe I mean I'm sure misogyny is a big part of it, but that's a weird ticket split. They
Yeah.
voted for protecting their abortion rights in some states and
Yeah.
voted against Kamala Harris.
Exactly right. So I think the gender dynamic is really complex here. Because in a lot of states, like look at Montana, right?
Hmm.
Ruby red state.
Yep.
We lost John Tester in the Senate, unfortunately, and he held on, frankly, probably longer than he had any right to, just in terms of the political needs of that state. But they passed an abortion rights amendment to
Yeah.
protect. So it is not the case that voters are simple-mindedly misogynistic. I don't think
Hmm.
that's the case. Did Kamala Harris have extra things, extra hurdles she had to climb? Sure, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, women candidates do, women do. Like it's just harder. On the other hand, I think she did get a fair hearing from a lot of people. I think that her favorables are still higher than Trump. So I don't think it's
Yeah.
that people with Hillary Clinton, I think there was decades worth of specifically misogynistic attacks levied at her that, she was always going to be underwater from. But
Hmm.
Kamala, I don't think necessarily was suffering from the same degree of outright misogyny. And certainly like and the other thing on that is that there's some evidence, and this is what I want Democrats to really absorb. There is a lot of evidence that actually women tend to outperform men in many instances. Not so much the
Hmm.
presidency, because the presidency is a whole different thing, but in state races, governor races, and Senate races, women actually often wind up doing better than a comparable male candidate with similar levels of experience because who votes? Women are much more
Yeah.
reliable voters than men. And every little bit helps, but it probably doesn't make that big a difference. Now, having said all of that, um, do I think Democrats will ever nominate a woman again for president? Maybe not,
Not-
because I think we're so traumatized. And I get it. Like, I think we're so traumatized that I'm not sure we can be reasoned out of this fear because
Hmm.
it's happened twice now.
Yeah.
So, if everybody else gets to be irrational and vote for the candidate who, if the majority of the country that appears to think that Donald Trump is somehow going to lower inflation when his policies specifically say that he will raise inflation, get to be irrational, then I think Democrats are probably also going to wind up being irrational enough to believe that there's a jinx on women candidates.
Yeah.
I hope not.
I do too. I mean, but maybe that's where a robust primary process that gets that not because I mean, I think she again starting late. I don't know if anyone else starting late could have done any better. I think that, and again, that might I'm not saying that to put the blame on Biden,
Can we put the blame on Biden a
you know.
little bit? Can I have can I
I
have just a
mean,
few seconds to go?
I
It wasn't great, Joe.
I think he would have. Well, obviously, it's well, yeah, you have to because they made the decision to stay in too long,
Yeah,
and his legacy, which I think should be a great legacy, will be
yeah,
ruined by this.
right.
And Trump will undo so many protections that he was working on building and creating. You need 2 terms to do a lot of these things, and yeah, so yeah, I guess we got to put some blame on Biden. I try and be so diplomatic.
I know. I mean, I'm with you. I think he's been a real, I actually think he's had some incredible accomplishments as president. I am very
Yeah,
grateful to him for his entire career of service. I think he was a fantastic vice president to Obama. I think he did wonderful work as a senator. I think he's a decent and good person.
yeah,
I think he let his ego get in the way of accurately perceiving his ability to run for election and has to take some amount of responsibility for this. I am not convinced that any candidate, given any amount of time, definitely
mm,
could have won
yeah,
in the environment we have. But we would have had a chance if we could have potentially come in with a little bit more of an outside candidate with a stronger core message who'd been able to refine their storytelling a little bit.
mm,
Kamala, I think, was a very capable candidate and did a really good job of presenting herself well, positioning herself on the side of the American people, etc. But what she's never been good at doing, and I had this criticism of her in the 2020 primary as well, is she's not a big picture person. She's not someone
mm,
who's I have a vision for what the future of America should look like, for what I
yeah.
think is important, for the change that I want to make, and this is how I want to enact it. Now, Trump has that vision. It's basically I would like to be Lord Voldemort, but it's
Yeah,
clear, right? Like you've got it.
an American Lord Voldemort.
An American Lord Voldemort, God damn it. Um, but Kamala has never been that sort of politician. And I do think that there would have been room for somebody who would have been like, that would be our best chance. It would be a Bill Clinton 92 type scenario, right? It
Yeah,
would be someone coming in going, hang on, there's another way to do this. Let's shift the political kind of conversation over to this territory that I want to be in
yeah,
instead of responding to Trump. And in the entire current political era, no candidate on the Democratic side has been able to genuinely move the conversation away from what Trump wants to talk about. Biden won on those terms in
mm,
2020. We haven't been able to move away from him setting the agenda.
yeah. Well, I mean, the most important thing a presidential candidate has to do is communicate. And that's where
Yeah.
Biden was failing in the end. And because he was failing basically for age related reasons, he wasn't communicating how great his legacy or how good things were turning around. Now, that doesn't mean that obviously people were struggling at the pump, but there were good things happening that people didn't. The fact that people believe the US economy is in the toilet when it's not is, hugely problematic. And, and, that's the frustrating thing is yes if we were in a recession of course I would have expected the incumbent party to lose, but the US economy is doing it's insane. But I mean I was there in the States recently as well, just like you were, and it was more expensive. You
Yeah.
could definitely feel it,
Yeah.
but everything else is going so much better than other countries. And
But they don't know what's going on in other countries. Like
well, I know that's part of
you know,
America's charm.
it's easy for you and me. Like I always look at it through the lens of is America doing better or worse than Britain and Europe, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the times the answer is we're doing better.
Hmm.
Times are tough, but we're doing better. They don't have that perspective, nor should they. Like how are they gonna like feel and understand that if the price of a gallon of milk is twice what it was 4 years ago, but it's three times that in Poland, they don't care. That's not relevant to them.
Yeah. um well, I think I mean it'll be well. There's going to be a lot of interesting analysis, and I think that you've pointed out a lot of things that are quite interesting, that are good. I mean, I guess, it's going to be tricky, like how much time we start staring at our navels. I feel invigorated to just say, right, we just have to start building the next.
Yeah.
We have to start. The midterm starts now, which is terrible
Just get on
and
with it.
awful. We get on with it, and of course look on what we see. But I think you and I, Karen, have diagnosed a lot of things correctly that everybody should just listen to. And if they
Only
do,
everyone would always listen to us, everything would be
I think
fine.
so. I mean, that's my takeaway. I say that to my family a lot, and especially my teenage children, and don't get a lot. I get a lot of read messages without replies.
Your kids are leaving you on red. Oh dear.
Oh yeah, all the time.
That
Or
is that
sometimes
is
not even, sometimes not even sometimes not even read. Like, are you looking at me? Like
that
my
is the
son
Gen
refuses.
Z version of a middle finger.
We don't. My son refuses to look at the family group chat. I'm like, well, that's where
Ooh.
we make decisions. He's like, I don't do group chats. I'm not gonna individually message you when we're trying to decide what takeaway to get for dinner. Well, yeah, but it's on the group chat. So
I
I feel
mean,
like
prove if
America.
you ever need one that this is a challenging communications environment. We can't even get through to our own
I'm
kids.
buying you dinner. Tell me what you want. I can't be bothered to read it. So I think
So you are Biden in this
again,
scenario. I have fixed your economy. I don't care.
um, but so I know that you were, in the vice chair of the Democrats Abroad, and you did have a podcast when we first met. But you've moved away from that, and you've written a novel. Is that right? That is political-esque. I want to hear
Yeah,
about
I
this, and
am.
then I will release you back into hopefully not misery for the next whichever.
Yeah, it will
But
release me into whatever comes next. Yeah, no, I've spent the last few years. So I obviously have a day job and a family and other kind of stuff. But over the last 4 years, my side project, if you will, my side gig, has been working on this kind of a novel which is where I've dumped all of the anxieties that I had about American democracy into
hmm
a hopefully entertaining fantasy story. In which an American political pollster, guy called Greg, who's a sort of a, you know the type,
yeah,
one of those guys, one of those
Greg, yeah.
Greg, a Greg. This guy called Greg gets lured into the kingdom of fairy and winds up having an affair with Titania of Shakespearean fame. And
Hmm.
um, and he convinces her that monarchy is an outdated system of government and he knows how to run a much better way to manage a kingdom. And he convinces her to hold an election and everything all goes to hell. And it was a comical slash entertaining, hopefully, lens through which I wanted to think about kind of how is democracy frail and fragile?
Hmm.
What is it, how is it breakable and what does it break? In other words, like what things can be broken by democracy, not just what things can be fixed by democracy. So I wanted to explore populism and I wanted to explore Americans' soft cultural imperialism, right? Our arrogance and our sense that we know how to do things and we can go and tell other countries how to do things.
Hmm.
All these ideas were sort of tied up in the book. And I've been fortunate enough to find literary representation for the book. I've got an agent in New York, and we are taking it on submission with editors next week. In fact, we were waiting until after the election. I was hoping it would feel less relevant after the election, but it probably feels
Uh,
more.
yeah. And I mean, I guess I'm excited about that. So you don't know when it'll come out yet? It's still
No,
in
we're in the
development.
process of, going on submission to editors means we're shopping it around to different publishing
Right.
houses, trying to find someone who will publish it and give me money for it. So we're in the
That's
selling cycle at the moment.
that's exciting. Um, and I guess as someone who's been around, because there's going to be some people who are, I mean, well, I'm feeling, I know the media, the right wing media is like, oh, liberal tears, and I did a little pop up on a place called GB News,
Oh, yes.
and
They keep calling me.
on
I kicked off.
behalf of Democrats abroad, and the question was on, well, one of the liberal comedians is crying on television, and I was like, yeah, well, just because we're comedians doesn't mean we don't have other emotions, and we're scared,
Yeah.
and understandably scared because the guy who won has promised to be a dictator on day one, all the things that we know he said. So, I mean, what having been through this, what sort of things do you do, or what would you say to people who are scared, or should they go write a
Yeah.
novel? Should they? What should they do?
I mean, genuinely, I do think make art if you can. Make
Hmm.
things, put things out there into the world, to whatever extent you can, however imperfectly or however haltingly you can. It's good to create. I think I can tell you what I've been doing in the last few days because, weirdly, having been through this before in 2016, I actually think the situation is worse now in terms of the
Mm,
risk to the country is more serious now because Trump will be unconstrained. But I find that as much as I'm very, very sad and angry, I'm actually dealing with it better because this time I am aware of the need to deal with my feelings.
mm,
Whereas last time I think I just blitzed through it all, bouncing off walls and falling into a heap every now and then. I've actually been really actively managing my mental health, and I would encourage everyone else to do that too. Just really think about what do you need to get you through the day. So, as you know, we talked about this before. I didn't go to any election night events because
mm.
I was hopeful, but I knew that it would not be mentally sustainable for me to be out and receiving the election results in that form. I needed to be able to control what I was taking in and how I was
Yeah,
responding to it and be able to switch it off when I needed to. And crucially, get some sleep. That's my other advice. Get some sleep to everyone. You're gonna need sleep. You're gonna need to like restore your brain. So go to bed early. Sleep a little later if you can. Try and get some rest. So that's what I've been doing. I've been trying to make sure that I switch off the light a little earlier than I used to. I've been trying to, I've actually finally taken Twitter off my phone.
yeah,
It was a big thing for me because honestly, Twitter was where I lived for many
mm,
years.
yeah,
But it no longer, the home that we had on that platform no longer exists. It is no
yeah,
longer available to us. It is time for everyone to just accept that Elon Musk is going to use it to destroy everything that you care about. So do however you need to do it. I've decided not to delete my account for the time being, but just to take it off my phone, notify the people on there, put up a post saying I'm not here anymore. Go find me on Blue Sky. Take yourself away from it. Be aware it's not a safe space for people who I was going to say for liberals. It's not safe for anyone who cares about other people and the future of the country. So step off those platforms and talk to other human beings. Like really go
mm,
find people in your life, talk to them, find opportunities to do good work locally. The democracy is not just doesn't just take place in elections. Democracy takes place it takes place in the conversations that we have with our friends and neighbors. Democracy takes place in the way that we show up for our schools and for our communities and for our towns and offer service to each other and give each other space and kindness. All of those things are part of what makes up a democracy, and they want it to be a hellscape for everyone. They want
mm,
it to be an unpleasant, they want the public sphere to be unpleasant.
yeah,
I'm saying that the best thing that we can do to make sure that the small d democracy, like not just elections, but the idea of a shared public space continues to exist, is to be kindness and service and helpfulness everywhere we show up in the world because it's not just a nice thing to do. It is actually the only way we can start to build democratic foundations that will allow this country to continue to exist in the in the form of a republic.
yeah. I mean,
So
and
yeah,
I think that's true, and no matter where anyone is. Well, thank you for that, Karen. And good luck with getting the book published. Hopefully, there's some publishers listening, maybe, and they'll go, "Oh, I want to see that." And yeah, let's catch up again and find out where things are at and what's going on.
absolutely. Thanks, Eric.
So there we go. Karin Robinson being our first post Kamala defeat guest. Fascinating discussion. She's already looking into numbers in ways that I hadn't thought of in a much more detailed and specific way that was really interesting. And really helpful and makes me, kind of see some of the things that went right and went wrong a little bit differently. So fascinating chat. I really appreciate her taking the time to come on. Thank you for listening. If you are someone who supports Democratic causes, it's time to start getting ready for the next election. If you're American overseas, Democrats Abroad is there. Join now. Or if you're not in overseas, if you're an American in the States, get involved. Or if you are a person of foreign interest, democracy is in your country, hopefully, as well. And it needs to be fought for every single day. It's going to be a rough ride, I can tell you. But this will be a good ride to be on and right here with us and me and you and Mark, our producer. So thank you to Mark for putting it together. Thank you to Karin for coming on. Let's keep an eye out for her book. And thank you very much for listening. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff you need to do. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.